be the summer palace of the Tsar once upon a time. As soon as the Prime Minister reached the summer palace, the Mariinsky Palace, incidentally, just as an aside, this was where that very famous Natu 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 song was also filmed, a place that is known for significant steps being taken. Well, this is exactly the location where the Prime Minister and Zelensky had talks which were scheduled to be for 1 hour, but the talks lasted over 2 hours, and this shows how significant the talks were. The talks were told, top sources telling India Today, they were held in a very cordial environment. Point one. Point two, the talks on agriculture, extremely significant. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's emphasis has always been that India and Ukraine can work together, not just for the benefit of the two countries, but also for developing countries, for the global south. And post G20, India has been a very strong voice of the global south. A war between Russia and Ukraine impact not just these two countries, but the global south adversely, and that is why peace in the region is extremely important. India has also made a big offer to Ukraine for integrated development, community integrated development, and this in a way is an offer to Ukraine that India can play a critical role in the redevelopment of Ukraine that's been adversely impacted by this conflict on for the past 2.5 years, 910 days and counting. Prime Minister Narendra Modi first had one-on-one talks with the Ukrainian president, and then there were restricted, bilateral talks. So first it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, then the National Security Advisor and the Prime Minister on the Indian side, and President Zelenskyy and his National Security Advisor, his National Security team, Mr. Yarmak on the other side. They had a long conversation, and then the restricted talks between the two delegations and statements that were made, and the 4 MOUs signed. These talks are extremely significant. It's a very significant first step being taken on the long and very difficult road to peace. Before I get you more on that story, we bring you this report of Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the second leg of his two-nation tour, first to Poland and then very, very important trip to Ukraine. We bring you this report.
An image sending ripples across the world. An elder statesman with a wartime president. Indian Prime Minister Modi and Ukraine's President Zelensky. Radiating an engagement that has sparked global interest and intrigue. Coming as it does, only 46 days after Modi embraced Ukraine's nemesis, Vladimir Putin, in Moscow. The Russian hug had sent shockwaves around the world and even sparked a reaction from Zelensky at the time, where he publicly decried the Modi-Putin hug as a huge disappointment and a devastating blow to peace efforts to see the leader of the world's largest democracy hug the world's most bloody criminal in Moscow on such a day. Zelensky's attack on the Moscow hug itself came 25 days after the Ukrainian president and Modi embraced on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy. 2 Modi-Zelensky hugs and handshakes 70 days apart, emphasizing the India-Ukraine relationship and the body language of the two leaders in the global spotlight. Zelensky has had to make peace with the India-Russia relationship. Any reservations, at least on the surface, appear to have evaporated, making way for an arm across the shoulder. In the Russia-Ukraine war's third year, India's role has assumed big significance. While the West backs Zelensky, Modi's diplomacy has been lauded as a textbook example of India's peace-first priorities. As the two leaders now mark a milestone in relations and reaffirm a strong bilateral embrace, all eyes will be on the next phase of the Russia-Ukraine war and India's role. With Gaurav Sawant in Kyiv, Ukraine, Bureau Report, India Today.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has repeatedly said that India is on the side of peace. India has strongly advocated dialogue and diplomacy for the solution to any conflict, to any war. He reiterated that in Poland. He said that once again in Ukraine. But the India's stance has been consistent. Before I get you more, I want to get you these images that are going absolutely viral, not just here in Ukraine, but virtually across the world, of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's warm hug. President Zelensky hugged the Prime Minister and then showed him images of the death and destruction caused in this war, especially to children. The Prime Minister very affectionately put an arm around President Zelensky as they watched images of the horror of war together. And then the Prime Minister commented on how the horrors of war bring a lot of pain, bring a lot of grief, and he stands with the families of the victims of the conflict. Incidentally, he'd said exactly the same thing when he was in Russia on the 8th of July, and a hospital here, a multi-speciality cancer hospital here, was targeted by a Russian missile. The Prime Minister, sitting with President Putin, had told him how conflict hurts, how loss of lives of innocent children, whether in terror or in war, continues to hurt, and children must be shielded from war. Let's listen in to President Zelensky.
Війни і справедливого миру для України – це пріоритет. Ми провели нещодавно перший інаугураційний саміт миру. Я хочу подякувати за те, що Індія була присутня на цьому саміті. І сьогодні обов'язково однією з тем буде саме саміт миру, як ми можемо просуватися в цьому напрямку. Ми дуже очікуємо, що Індія зможе доєднатися до спільного комюніке інаугураційного саміту, і про це я буду говорити з прем'єр-міністром. Вчора, до речі, відбулася перша, а після саміту миру, перша енергетична зустріч в онлайн-форматі. Ми дуже зацікавлені, щоб всі країни світу доєдналися до рішення всіх криз, які принесла ця війна. І енергетична зустріч сама по собі – це вже великий прогрес. Далі у нас зустріч щодо продовольчої безпеки і гуманітарної. На сьогодні ми погодили з стороною наших сьогоднішніх гостей, з Індією, погодили 4 документи в цей історичний візит прем'єр-міністра Моді між Україною і Індією. Це медична сфера, це співпраця в аграрному напрямку, це гуманітарні відносини, це культура. І підготовлена спільна заява за змістом візиту прем'єр-міністра і щодо розбудови стратегічного партнерства між нашими країнами, торгівлі між нашими країнами та військово-технічна співпраця. Все це має зміцнюватись. Я дуже за це дякую. Радий вас бачити. Слава Україні!
एक्सेलेंसी, हम लंबे समय से एक बात सुनते हैं कि युद्ध की सबसे पहली कैजुअलिटी ट्रूथ होता है, लेकिन जब आज मैं उन बालकों की स्मृति में बनाए हुए म्यूजियम को आपके साथ जाकर के अपने श्रद्धा सुमन अर्पित कर रहा था।
Your Excellency, we've been talking about the war which has been going on for a long time, and the first casualty of the war is truth. Today, when I had an occasion to pay my respects to the children who had lost their lives, and I went to the memorial which was constructed in their memory along with you, my heart was filled with emotions, and my heart felt a great sense of grief. And the casualty of truth is because of the death of innocent children, and it's very painful. For any civilized world, for all those people who believe in humanitarian values, for all those people who are sensitive to humanitarian values, such incidents are totally unacceptable. In the whole world, for all those people who believe in humanitarian values, such incidents cannot be accepted.
इसको स्वीकार नहीं कर सकता है। एक्सेलेंसी, इस दर्दनाक परिस्थितियों के बीच भी
Your Excellency, despite those tragic circumstances, you welcomed my delegation and myself with such warmth. I convey my heartfelt gratitude to you for that.
मैं हृदय से आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। एक्सेलेंसी, आज का दिवस भारत और यूक्रेन के संबंधों के लिए एक बहुत
Your Excellency, today is a historic day in India-Ukraine relations. Today, for the very first time, an Indian Prime Minister is visiting the land of Ukraine. This on its own is a very historic event.
यह अपने आप में एक ऐतिहासिक घटना है। कल आपका नेशनल डे है। ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण दिवस है।
Tomorrow is your national day. It's a very important day, and on my own behalf and on behalf of the 1.4 billion people of India, I convey my very best wishes to you, and I hope and I pray for peace and prosperity of Ukraine.
और मैं कामना करता हूँ शांति के लिए, सुख और समृद्धि के लिए। एक्सेलेंसी, 2021 में ग्लासगो में मिले थे।
Excellency, in 2021, we had met for the first time in Glasgow. And from the very first meeting with you, I felt a very deep sense of friendship with you. And you very respectfully invited me to Ukraine. And at that time, I could not even realize that I would be visiting Ukraine under such circumstances.
कि मुझे ऐसी परिस्थिति में यूक्रेन आने की नौबत आएगी। एक्सेलेंसी, हमारे द्विपक्षीय संबंधों में
Your Excellency, despite the difficult circumstances, our bilateral relations are seeing good progress. And I can say that in such a tense environment, progress in our bilateral relations between India and Ukraine reflects the maturity of our bilateral relations.
ये प्रगति हम दोनों देशों की मैच्योरिटी को प्रतिबिंबित करती है। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आज बड़े आदरपूर्वक मेरी उस भावना को व्यक्त करना चाहता हूं कि जब युद्ध के प्रारंभिक दिन थे,
Your Excellency, being in Kyiv today, I respectfully convey my very warm feelings and emotions on one particular aspect. When this war started, thousands of Indian children were stuck in Ukraine who had come here to study, and they were stuck in difficult situation. And the way you supported them, the way you helped them, and in such great sensitivity, you not only understood our concerns, but made all efforts to address our concerns. So for that, on my own behalf, on behalf of 1.4 billion people of India, and on behalf of those students who are stuck here and their families, I convey my heartfelt gratitude to you.
उस संकट की घड़ी से निकल करके आए हुए उन बच्चों के, उनके परिवारजनों की तरफ से आपका आज मैं हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। एक्सेलेंसी, आप भी भली बात जानते हैं और पूरा विश्व भी जानता है कि युद्ध के समय हमने दो प्रकार की भूमिकाओं का रास्ता अपनाया।
Your Excellency, you are well aware and the entire world knows that regarding the war, India has had a twofold role in all of the situation, and we have tried to our best to fulfill our role. First is regarding from the humanitarian perspective. In the time of crisis, there are several types of requirements that the people of Ukraine needed, and to fulfill those requirements, we adopted a humanitarian point of view, and we tried our best to make those demands and requirements fulfilled. And I can assure you that in the future as well, going ahead from this humanitarian point of view, we will always stand with you, and you will find us 2 steps ahead.
भारत हमेशा हमेशा आपके साथ खड़ा रहेगा और 2 कदम आगे चलेगा। एक्सेलेंसी, हमने जो दूसरा मार्ग चुना, वो दूसरा मार्ग है युद्ध से दूर रहने का।
Your Excellency, the second aspect of our role has been to stay away from the war. But it is with full conviction that we stayed away from the war, but it never meant that we were just an indifferent bystander. We never adopted that role. We were never neutral. And we had a side right from the first day. Our side was peace. Excellency, I come from the land of Buddha. And in my land, there is no place for war. I come from the land of Mahatma Gandhi, who showed the path of peace to the entire world.
हम महात्मा गांधी की धरती से आते हैं, जिसने पूरे विश्व को शांति का संदेश दिया है। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं आज जब यूक्रेन आया हूं तब मैं 140
Excellency, today when I've come to Ukraine, I have come with the feelings and sentiments of 1.4 billion people of India, and their sentiments are inspired by humanity. So coming to the land of Ukraine, I have come with the message of peace.
शांति का संदेश लेकर के आया हूं। Excellency,
Your Excellency, a few days ago, I hosted the third Voice of Global South Summit, in which 120 countries participated. So on behalf of those countries of Global South as well, I have come with the message of peace.
Your
Excellency, you well understand and are aware that as far as the peace is concerned, India has made its proactive contribution towards that. And you're also aware that our approach has been people-centric. And I want to tell you and the entire world, this is our conviction and our commitment, and we say it very loudly and clearly. The message is that we respect we support the respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is of utmost priority to us.
हम उसका समर्थन करते हैं। कुछ समय पहले समरकंद में जब राष्ट्रपति
2 years ago in Samarkand, when I had met President Putin, I had told him, looking into his eye in front of the media, that this is not the era of war.
मैं पिछले दिनों रशिया की मुलाकात के लिए गया था। वहां भी मैंने साफ शब्दों में अपनी बात कही है कि किसी भी
And last month as well, when I visited Russia to meet President Putin, I told him very clearly that problems cannot be resolved on the battlefield. The only way of resolving problems is through dialogue and through diplomacy, and that without losing any further time, we should move towards that direction.
बिना समय गंवाए उस दिशा में आगे बढ़ना चाहिए। दोनों पक्षों को
Both sides will have to sit together and to look for ways to come out of this crisis.
रास्ते तलाशने होंगे। Excellency, आज हम जब रूबरू मिल रहे हैं तब
Your Excellency, today we are meeting in person, and I have come to the land of Ukraine, and I have just visited a memorial dedicated to the children who were martyred in the war, and my heart is filled with emotions and sentiments. So today I would like to have an in-depth discussion with you on the way forward towards peaceful resolution.
विशेष रूप से चर्चा करना चाहूँगा। Excellency, मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाना चाहता हूँ कि शांति के हर
Your Excellency, I assure you that for all those efforts being made towards peace, India is ready to make its proactive contribution. And I personally, as a friend, if there is any role that I can play, I would very much like to play that role towards peaceful resolution.
जरूर करना चाहूँगा। एक मित्र के रूप में मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूँ। Excellency, मैं आज जब आया हूँ, कल National Day।
Your Excellency, I have come on the eve of your National Day, and therefore I would like that all of us work towards early restoration of peace, and India will be ready to make its proactive contribution towards that objective. And once again, I convey my heartfelt gratitude to you for the warm welcome extended to me.
आपके स्वागत सत्कार के लिए मैं हृदय से आपका बहुत-बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ।
So you heard Prime Minister Narendra Modi, where he said both sides, Russia and Ukraine, need to engage with each other and peacefully find the road ahead. And India, whatever assistance India can offer, India is willing to offer that assistance. Let's also quickly cut across and listen into External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar.
Taking these discussions forward, not necessarily within the format of the summit. There are obviously multiple possibilities here and multiple views about those possibilities. So what I can say is that it was a very detailed, a very open, in many ways a very constructive discussion. And if there is any further development in that regard, we will obviously keep you all informed. With regard to other issues, I think the best that I would do, because we have a paucity of time, would be to refer you to the joint statement. Again, I'm summing it up very succinctly. I'm not touching all points, but in the joint statement, I want to emphasize that the Prime Minister and the President reiterated their readiness to further cooperation in upholding principles of international law, including the UN Charter, such as respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty of states. As I said, they spoke about the summit on peace in Ukraine. The last meeting was in June of 2024. In terms of our own positions, I think I read out for you that particular paragraph. I would say, in addition to that, there are references in the joint statement to our bilateral cooperation, to trade, to commerce, to education. We signed 4 agreements today. One was in regard to community development projects in Ukraine. One was in regard to drug control standards and harmonization. One was on cultural exchange, and the 4th one was agriculture. Finally, let me just say that we have been, in the past, been providing humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. I think 17 consignments so far have been delivered. These are largely in the medical, on the medical side. And today we handed over the Bhishma. Let me have a look at that. Where is that? These are cubes which contain medical support equipment, which are very effective, very compact, very deployable in many ways. So these cubes with a total weight of 22 tons were handed over today, along with 10 gensets. So I think this would probably be a fair summary of today's discussions. I'm sure you will have some questions or thoughts. I'd be happy to answer them.
We open the floor now, and please do introduce yourself before you ask the question. So let's start there. Rishikesh.
Hi sir, Rishikesh from Press Trust of India. So we have seen in the past that Ukraine side has made a very strong statement on the issue of India's import, especially on gas, energy or coal. So when today Prime Minister meets with President Zelensky, did President urge India to curb its imports from Russia?
Okay. Can I take a few, because I'd like to cover as many people as possible. So Vishnu.
Sir, Vishnu Shok from NDTV. Were there any specific proposals made by us, by India, to Ukraine in terms of a possible immediate path towards ending the conflict?
So, question is specific proposals and immediate path.
Specific proposals
and the adjectives in question are specific proposal and immediate path.
Yes, sir.
Right, got it.
You can take one more question.
Yeah, sure, I'll take 3.
Ukrainian channel 1+1 Media. I have 2 questions. The first question is, India didn't position itself as a negotiator between Ukraine and Russia. However, Bloomberg reports that your side is willing to deliver some message from Russian side to Ukrainian. Was there any specific message today from Putin to Volodymyr Zelenskyy? And the second question, what is the stance of the India on Chinese peace plan? Because India respects Ukrainian territorial integrity, and it doesn't include it. It didn't include it in Chinese peace plan.
Can I go with these three answers?
Sir.
Okay. So the first question, did the issue of India's energy trade with Russia come up? Yes, it did. I wouldn't say at great length, but what we did was to explain to the Ukrainian side what was the energy market scenario. The fact that today many energy producers are sanctioned, making the market potentially very tight, and why actually today there is a compulsion, in fact not just a compulsion, I mean why it is in the interest of the international economy as a whole that oil prices remain reasonable and stable. On Vishnu, your question, in a way, they kind of feed into each other. Look, I would put it this way. Clearly, we've been having our own thinking and discussions with many other countries. Also, because the Prime Minister was recently in Moscow, there were detailed discussions there, which we have been quite public about. So he shared, I think, many of the thoughts and the substance of these discussions. I wouldn't necessarily characterize it in the way in which you said Bloomberg had described it, but in turn, I think we heard from President Zelensky at some length what his own views were, about these issues, but what his own views were about the subject as a whole. I mean, not necessarily to anything which we may have told him, we may have heard in Moscow. So it was a very back and forth discussion. To my mind, there was certainly, I'm sure that there was information which we, obtained here, and I'm sure we also perhaps may have brought up points or flagged issues which may or may not have been people would have been cognizant of here. The way we ended was that at the end of the discussion, I think there was a sense that this is a very complex issue. I mean, yes, certainly we have this one particular format, the peace in Ukraine format. But as I said, it is the view not just of India, but certainly of India as well, that there are, there could be multiple ways of approaching this issue. Now, you asked me for one of those examples, and I'm not comparing here. I'm just responding to your particular question. Regarding, whatever China may have proposed, I think it's not for us to respond. I think it is for the parties concerned to respond. So I would suggest you direct that question at the Ukrainian government.
Can we have a question here? Rishabh, please.
Minister, good afternoon. Rishabh from Times Now. Sir, you spoke about Ukrainians asking us to be part of the Ukraine Peace Summit that last happened in Switzerland. Has there been any proposal from Ukraine to India to try and convince Russia to be on that table? Because Russia last time was not part of the Peace Summit in Switzerland. So has there been any talks from Ukrainian side that India should try and get Russia also on the table?
Siddhant.
Sir, Siddhant from WION. Did the Ukrainian side briefed on the Kursk incursion? Sir, this side. Yeah. Did the Ukrainian side briefed on the Kursk incursion? And my second question is, PM paid his homage tributes to the victims, the children who died in the war. The Prime Minister also mentioned this to President Putin 2 months ago in Moscow. So what was the message in terms of Prime Minister paying his homage to the children?
Please. There.
Thank you for the question. Minister Nick Beak from BBC News. You talked about Prime Minister Modi's visit to Moscow last month, and a lot of people here were very upset to see that embrace between the two leaders. Also, they were quite upset to see India overtake China in terms of the biggest importer of Russian crude oil. And also, they say they're disappointed that there hasn't been an explicit condemnation of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So, in light of that, I'm just wondering whether you had difficulty today persuading President Zelensky that India is not favouring Russia, but is indeed pursuing a policy of non-alignment. And secondly, because of that meeting in Russia last month, I think Prime Minister Modi is probably the most significant, influential world leader to have spoken to both sides recently. What personal role could he play in some sort of pursuit of peace? Thank you.
Yours was the first question. In terms of the peace in Ukraine summit, look, it was discussed at some length because much of what President Zelensky said revolved around, not everything, but a significant part of it. Now, where they go, at the end of the day, it's their initiative. Okay? It is their initiative in which we have taken part. I mean, if you look at it from at every stage of that initiative, when it started in Copenhagen, his predecessor was there. Then the NSA went into Jeddah. The deputy NSA went to Riyadh and to Davos. Similarly, the hybrid formats in Doha, even at Bergenstock, we have been represented at that level. So we have been represented there, but we also agree on some parts of it and don't agree necessarily on all of it. So I think there was a very open discussion on this. Now, what will be the next steps? Who exactly will come? Will the Russians come in, not come in? That's really not an issue for us to take a call. I mean, that's an issue which presumably the government of Ukraine is dealing with. Siddhant, regarding your issue on Kursk, yes, I would say the military situation, including some recent developments, did come up for discussions. In terms of the visit, what you asked about the homage, particularly to the children. Look, in any conflict, obviously, any death is something which is, to put it mildly, regrettable. And if it is a civilian death, a humanitarian death, even more so. And if it is a child's death, even more so. So I think it is something which touches everybody. And even, when we were in Moscow, it is a subject on which the Prime Minister spoke publicly. So I think it was very natural for him to come and express that feeling in some kind of gesture. Regarding your question, in our part of the world, when people meet people, they are given to embracing each other. It may not be part of your culture, but I assure you it's part of ours. So, in fact, today I think I saw the Prime Minister also embrace President Zelensky, and I've seen him do it with a number of other leaders in a number of other places. So I think perhaps we have a slightly cultural a gap here in terms of what these courtesies mean. In terms of what you asked about the oil issue, look, India is a big oil consumer. It's a big oil importer because we don't have oil. Now, it's not like there's a political strategy to buy oil. There is a oil strategy to buy oil. There's a market.
So you hear the External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar give great details about the conversation between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Zelensky and the 4 MOUs that were signed between the two countries. Joining me now on this special broadcast from Ukraine is Yevhenia Kravachuk, a Ukrainian member of parliament and deputy chair of the Committee on Humanitarian and International Policy. Madam Kravachuk, how do you look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Ukraine and his interaction with President Zelensky?
Thank you for having me on your show, and greetings to all people of India. We do see this visit as historical. It's the first visit of Prime Minister of India to the modern independent Ukraine in 33 years tomorrow, and it's a very, very special time. Tomorrow we celebrate the Independence Day. President Zelensky and Prime Minister Modi had one-on-one conversation, a quite long one, but also with key advisors and ministers. We expect more news to come out on joint statement, but also some treaties, some documents that will be signed between the governments and some plans to be made. Of course, we're happy to hear that India is ready to play a bigger role in this peace, finding a peaceful solution to this war of aggression that Russia started on Ukraine. We are in war, in fact, for 10 years, since 2014 and the annexation of Crimea and the start of the war in Donbass. And of course, we are almost, it's 30-year full-scale invasion.
If we were to talk about the current situation, right now the two sides have exchanged their opinion and their views on what's happening in Kursk, what's happening in Donetsk, the military situation. But the effort was to have the conversation on rebuilding of Ukraine, an MOU on agriculture cooperation, people-to-people cooperation. Do you think that India is walking the talk on saying that it's for Russia and Ukraine to find common ground for peace, and India is willing to offer whatever assistance is required?
By the way, we're also thankful for the humanitarian assistance. It probably, such a great big country that is India, the biggest democracy, could do more. And we have an Indian diaspora here, and they met today with Prime Minister Modi. And we do expect that more students could come to Ukraine and study in our universities. We have a very long tradition of having Indian students coming to Ukraine and being part of our society, and we welcome them back. Of course, the topic of reconstruction is very important. That we're struggling to have access to frozen Russian assets. It's about $300 billion of dollars that are stored in different European banks in Europe. And we do believe that this money could be used for the reconstruction. And of course, the economical cooperation should deepen between two countries. And very symbolically,
yes,
that the visit started was this museum where both President Zelensky and Prime Minister Modi saw what harm was done to children. We have more than 500 children that were killed. And I think that Prime Minister Modi felt at least part of this pain that, our families are feeling.
Okay. Now, do you now think that there is better understanding that India and Ukraine have about each other's position? Even when Prime Minister Narendra Modi was with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he expressed sorrow at the loss of children, loss of lives of children, and he said that India is open to offer whatever assistance India can offer in the reconstruction of Ukraine. There's agriculture cooperation, there's an MOU on agriculture, there's an MOU on culture, there's forward movement of talks on defense and trade. Does that help Ukraine once again get back on its feet, especially when there's increased cooperation even in pharmaceuticals, Indian pharmaceuticals playing a bigger role here in Ukraine?
Of course, it's always good when these talks are person to person during the visits, and I really hope that all of these plans that were made today and the documents signed will be fulfilled in mutual cooperation projects, which would be beneficial to both countries. And regarding the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Russia, well, I think Putin, when he knew about the attack, obviously, right? So he sort of like set up Prime Minister Modi that he was in Moscow because the visit was planned and the attack, obviously, is being planned to have this bad press for Prime Minister Modi. Because everyone was wondering how. There was just Children's Hospital hit, and it's the visit in the same days. And it's very good that Prime Minister Modi reacted right away, being in Moscow, saying that he feels sorry to those who lost their lives in this brutal attack. And that was attack by Russian missile direct hit into the hospital. I remember these days, and
if we were
yes.
Madam, if we were to talk about the road ahead, if I may, the road ahead, how does peace get restored in this region? Because war is costing lives both on the Ukrainian side and on the Russian side. Of course, it is for Ukraine and Russia to decide on the road ahead. India is willing to assist. In your appreciation, what is that role of assistance that India can play at this point of time, especially after Prime Minister Narendra Modi has visited both Moscow and Kyiv?
Well, first of all, it's very important that during the press conference, during the joint statements, they mentioned the UN Charter. And the rules of these UN charters mean that one country cannot decide the borders, cannot occupy another country. And Ukraine has not started this war. It was started by Russia because they want part of our land and part of our people. So if we do agree, and it looks like that we do agree that UN Charter should be supported and put up on the table, then it would be extremely important that India will be in the process of organizing, and participating in the second peace summit. I know that India is participating in a few working groups on different topics. Indian representative was in Switzerland for the first time. It did not sign the communique, but could be, more active for organizing a second summit and bringing Russia to the table, but with common understanding that Russia cannot invade any countries, including Ukraine.
Okay. But the fact remains is now, will there be forward movement on the road to peace, which remains the biggest issue in this region? And we'll be tracking that story very, very closely. Madam, for joining me here on India Today, many thanks. So the situation right now is that India is moving forward on multiple fronts. India is moving forward to ensure that India-Ukraine ties get even better. The 4 MOUs that have been signed, that will be critical, because agriculture is one area where both countries want to cooperate, and this is for the benefit not just of Russia or not just of Ukraine and India, but also the developing countries in the region, the global south. That becomes extremely important. The MOU on cultural development, the MOU that's been signed on the reconstruction of Ukraine. India has made a big offer to Ukraine, whether it's agriculture or industry or infrastructure development. India has offered all assistance. Now it's up to Ukraine to take up that assistance, whether it's required with Indian help or just with Indian funds. And we will continue to track that story very, very closely. That is all I have for you on this special broadcast. The Prime Minister now heads back. So it's again that 8.5 hour long journey to Poland, from where he'll fly back to India after the successful conclusion of his 3-day 2-nation tour. First to Poland, again a very important partner of Ukraine in this war. But that is all I have for you on this broadcast from Kyiv, Ukraine. Many thanks for watching. News and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.
around to say hello. I'm so fly. You took a nosedive. Careful when you play on my level. For you it's so. Hey, hello.
Motorola Razr 50 Ultra. Flip the script.
Hello, Moto.
Motorola Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini.
Hi, I am AI anchor Sana, bringing the top headlines for you, presented by Motorola. Tragic bus accident in Nepal, Indian bus plunges into river, several killed, rescue operations underway. SEBI bans Anil Ambani from securities market for 5 years, imposes 25 crore rupees penalty for diversion of funds. CBI grills Ajikar's ex-principal Sandeep Ghosh for 8th straight day in Kolkata rape and murder case.